Good afternoon, everyone. I am Paul Perdue. I am the infrastructure nerd, and this is an Attorney Computer Systems Coffee Pot webinar, the March 2014 Coffee Pot webinar to be specific. Today we're talking about workflows in PracticeMaster. I call them the Lost Atlantis of PracticeMaster, and I guess some people liked that name and some people didn't. I merely wanted to convey the fact that these are something that a lot of people don't even know are in there. They were added in version 16.1. They were enhanced a little bit in 16.2. They were enhanced a little bit in 17. But they are very, very cool, and we're going to take a look at them. But before we do, a little housekeeping. This is where I tell you where the bathrooms are, but you already know that, so I'm going to tell you instead how to get around this virtual control panel that you may be looking at. This is the GoToWebinar virtual control panel. This button bar juts off to the left and includes a button that looks like like arrows pointing to the right. That button, when you click it, will cause this bigger part to slide out of the way. You'll want to do that so you can see everything there is to see. When you do that, this button that looks on my screen like an arrow pointing to the right will turn into a button that looks like an arrow pointing to the left, meaning that if you click it again, this thing will slide back out so that you can type a question here if you have one but you're feeling shy. Type your question, hit the send button. Leanne, our humble yet capable moderator, will interrupt me at an opportune time, ask your question on your behalf, look diligently for any follow-up questions. So if you have them as we are answering your question, if you have more questions, my questions beget other questions, just type the follow-up questions right here and don't forget to hit send, and Leanne will continue to ask those questions on your behalf until you've got your question fully answered. If you are not feeling shy, and every time I do this we get into trouble, I'm going to say we haven't had anybody not be shy in about 4 or 5 months now. So somebody, let's not be shy today. And press this button that looks like a hand with an arrow pointing upwards in front of it. That means raise your hand. Same thing, Leanne will interrupt me at the opportune time, but then she'll unmute your mic and let you ask your own question. Again, that mic will continue to be unmuted throughout the, I'm sorry, I just had this premise that I had not started the recording, but Leanne would have yelled at me. Continue to ask your questions if you're unmuted. It's kind of like a two-way conversation at that point. And Leanne will not mute your microphone until you're done asking your questions. So without any further ado, I'm going to press this button and that button, and we're going to PracticeMaster. Now this is the client screen, so we're going to back out here, and we're going to go take a look at from the very beginning. We've signed into PracticeMaster. What are workflows? Well, you can think of them as being things that are triggered by something else, either by a user clicking something or by something happening to a certain file. Now, if you've ever worked with Time Matters actually calls them triggers. They're not as good as workflows. And during the development of workflows at Software Technology, if you happened to slip and call them triggers, you had to put $5 in the jar. But it's the same sort of thing. Something that is triggered by something else. Now, let's take a look at a couple quick examples, and then we're going to delve very deeply into how those examples were done. So let's say we are working away, and we're working for Kelly White, and we're going to bill some time we just did something. And we're going to bill an hour for having a conversation with an expert witness. So we come into the fee section, and as you know, there's many ways to enter fees. This is one that's done through PracticeMaster. And we're going to pretend that I'm Michael Jensen, and that today is 11/17/14. Those are aspects of my sample data, so don't be alarmed. And we're going to put in 1 hour, and we're going to say talk to expert. I won't go into any detail because I can't really type and talk at the same time. Now those of you that are paying attention may notice that I didn't put in 1 hour. I thought I did, but I didn't. So I'm going to hit save. Now this workflow is set up to automatically generate an email from the person who's entering the time in theory, to somebody else, to the administrator, to the bookkeeper, to the controller, to the accountant, to somebody that cares in the billing department about the fact that this guy probably didn't mean to enter 11 hours. He probably meant to enter something less. For my sake of demonstration, I've had it sent to me, assuming I'm also the controller. So that part of it doesn't make sense. You'll have to try and get by that. And this is an e-note. This particular e-note is one that has a linked record. It says hours greater than 10. I could have said this user. I added hours greater than 10 because it's coming from the user. And something you may not have noticed, the user has no idea that this e-note was sent. All he knows is that he put in some time. He thinks it was an hour, and he's gone on with his day. But this e-note was generated to tell whoever cares that somebody entered hours greater than 10 and specifically what client and matter it was added for and what the description of the fee entry was. And since this is an e-notify, it actually contains a link back to the fee record in question where you can see that they entered 11 hours. Very cool. Now, that's one that is triggered. Now, they're all triggered. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this e-note. If we're in the client screen, here's an example of another one that's triggered, start client letter. This one's triggered by me, the user, okay? Most workflows are actually triggered by something else that happens within the system, not user activated, but we'll look at that in a second. So let's say we want to start a client letter. We're on the appropriate client. It merely starts a document, a specific document for the client that you currently happen to be on. There we have it, all done. Now, you could easily have started this letter by simply clicking on the appropriate client, as I did, and then going up here and clicking Word Document Assembly, or going up here and clicking Word Document Assembly. But keep in mind, workflows can do more than one thing. My simple examples are single item workflows. But we're going to talk about the fact that you can have multiple things happening. So I could have sent a letter to a client, also generated a fee agreement, also generated a follow-up letter to the referral source if there was one, but not if there wasn't. I could have also docketed 7 days off to check that the fee agreement's returned. I could have docketed that my secretary called the client and set up their initial consultation or whatever the next step is. I could have had this all happen simply by setting this. Now, if those things were all happening, it wouldn't just be start client letter, it would be start client welcome letter or something like that. Now let's take a look at one more example, only what I'm going to do is I'm going to write the example as we go. So let's say, for instance, that if we're going to schedule a new entry for using a calendar code for, let's say, deposition. We have a question. So let's get that question going first. Leanne?
Susie wants to know, can we request alerts when time entries are submitted at the 0.00 level rather than the matter level? At our office, it's 0.0. Their matter level is 0.001.
I'm not quite sure what she's asking. Susie, go ahead and listen a little bit more because I think it'll become clear that you can do this for anything. In other words, I think what she's saying is, well, I'm not quite sure. Susie, if you could type a little bit of clarification to Leanne and we'll get that question answered. So back to my example of a deposition. Now, if you're in a firm, let's say that either does a lot of plaintiff-oriented work or, well, let's say it's an insurance defense firm, okay? But this is just an example of one thing being scheduled and causing something else to be scheduled. In this hypothetical insurance defense firm, when you schedule a deposition, you need to follow up with a summary of that deposition to the adjuster within 7 days. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a workflow that says when a deposition is scheduled using the calendar code deposition, it automatically creates a 7-day follow-up that that deposition summary be sent to the adjuster. So now that I've explained it, I'm going to actually create the workflow. I'm going to go over to Manage Workflows, and I'm going to right-click and choose New, and I'm going to call this 7-Day Depo Follow-Up. Okay? Now, down here you define whether it's user-activated or whether it happens when a record is added, changed, or deleted. Well, if a depo was deleted, we wouldn't want to schedule a follow-up. It's more when the record is added. It could also be when it's changed, but that's probably not the case. So for the sake of this discussion, I'm going to say it's when the record is added. It's not inactive. I don't want to prompt before it's run. I want to schedule this depo and then have it immediately pop up a scheduling that's already filled out with the appropriate information for the 7-day follow-up. So I'm not going to prompt. It's a filtered instance. In other words, I am in the calendar file, and I don't want to do what I'm about to schedule to be done for every record that's created in the client file. And that's what I'm saying when I check this box. I only want the ones where the calendar code equals DEP. So I come in here and I say calendar code equal to, and I can actually drop down the box and choose deposition. I can also specify that a certain field changes from one thing to another. For instance, if you want, when this item is completed, that this next item gets scheduled, you're looking specifically for date completed was blank before and not after. Okay? Now that would actually be a record that changes because you're not adding you couldn't add a calendar item where the date completed was blank before because you're adding it, and that just doesn't make sense. We can also say we want specific fields to have specific values, or any field has been changed. So we have a lot of these things that can trigger what happens, and we can also use the filter. In our example, we specifically care about new items that are created in the calendar where the calendar code is equal to deposition. Now, before we get into too deep, let's tell it what we want to do. Now, that's what's down here. These are the actions to take. This is some stuff that defines it. What's it called? Is it active or not? Do we prompt before we run? What file is it being acted on? I ran this, created this from the calendar file, so it's on the calendar file. What is happening? What's the source? These records that have this, or what event is happening? Records added, certain things happening. Now what do? We're going to create a new record in the calendar file. We're going to define a template, and this is what the new record is going to look like. It's going to have a due date that is equal to, and don't worry if you don't understand all this. A, you can go back and look at the recorded version. B, there's all sorts of documentation on how to do workflows. C, if you're really just here to kind of get a feel for what's available and what's possible, we can help you with the workflows. So don't get wrapped up in the details of exactly how I'm doing every single thing I'm doing. I just want to give you the flavor. So the due date needs to be the value from the original record plus 7. 7 days after the date of the real deposition. The calendar code here is going to be maybe deadline, maybe there won't be a calendar code. The description is going to be follow-up, a deposition summary due on, and then I'm actually going to add the value of the description from the original record, which would be deposition of Paul Perdue, probably in our example. Oops, not value field. From the original record, the description. We don't have any comments. The type is going to be a task as opposed to an event. We don't have a start time or an end time. There is no alarm, although there could be. The client ID is going to be the same client that the deposition was scheduled for. So we're just pulling in the client ID from the original record that started this whole thing. I'm not going to worry about contacts. The user group, the same people that were responsible for the depositions are going to be the ones that are responsible for filing and preparing and filing the deposition summary. So I'm just going to pull the group information from the original file, from the deposition itself. It's not private. I'm not worried about reminders. I'm going to save this. I'm not going to tell it to automatically save and close. I'll explain what that means in a second. We're going to go do it. Now, Leanne, I want you to cross one set of fingers. I'm going to cross one set of fingers. Hopefully they don't cancel each other out. By the way, if you cross both sets of fingers, the oldest trick in the book, don't do that because they cancel each other out. So I'm going to cross my fingers because I just wrote this kind of from scratch. And I'm going to start over. I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to schedule a depot for this person. And we're going to schedule it for Monday, the 24th of November in the year 2014. This is the key right here. I'm using DEP as the calendar code. Deposition of who? Paul Purdue. It's at 9 a.m. and it's probably going to last till noon. And we're putting it on Ron's calendar. Ready? Everybody ready? I'm going to save it. It worked. There it is. This is my new record that's being created. I saved the deposition. It's done. And now it's creating something that's a week from when I scheduled the deposition itself that has a description of deposition summary due on deposition of Paul Purdue. Perhaps I could use better language. I was kind of going from the seat of my pants. It's a task. It's scheduled for the same client, for the same person. Bam, we're done. Now, there are all sorts of things that can be done. When you add a new client, you immediately schedule a task to set up the file and send a fee agreement. Maybe when you add the new client, you also just create the fee agreement and set up a task to follow up on it. That's an example of a triggered event. When you schedule a deposition, you schedule a follow-up. The same firm that uses this particular approach, when they schedule a pretrial, it schedules a 30-day in advance pretrial summary for the insurance company. Now, taking this just a step further. First off, I'm going to explain. It is presenting me with this record, which I can either accept by saving it. I can, of course, make any changes to it that I need to, or I can just cancel it and say, no, we're not going to do a deposition summary for this matter. But what if you had certain clients that wanted a deposition summary and certain clients that didn't? I could go in here and alter my workflow and go to the filter and say, not only does the calendar code need to equal DEP, but also the client ID needs to equal something. Okay? So I can actually, and maybe this has something to do with what Susie was talking about, because I want only to care about what client the client number is, the part to the left of the decimal point. I don't care about what matter it is. So certain clients want a deposition follow-up, certain clients don't. But what I'm saying here is that I can get very specific about what I'm doing. I'm not going to go into a whole bunch of details about how I set these parameters. This is getting into some very deep logic. If you need help with this, even if you're doing workflows on your own, but you need help just structuring the logic a little bit, we can do that. We can help you write workflows. We can help you decide what workflows you need. We can help you decide what workflows would work best for whatever it is that you want to do. Or we can just help you to fine-tune them. Maybe you want to do all the work. You want to create the workflows, but you have a little trouble deciding exactly how to say for this specific client as opposed to a specific matter. So keep in mind, we can provide whatever level of assistance you want. I'm going to go ahead and not save that, and we're done there. Now, Leanne's got her hand up again, so let's go back and see what we're at.
Paul, Brian wants to know, can you add a workflow to send a welcome email upon adding a new client to tabs and then send another email 10 days out and 30 days out to the client?
You can't schedule the email itself. If you look here at what you can do under Actions, you can create a record. We just did that. We created a separate calendar record to do the deposition summary after a deposition was scheduled. We can change a record. We can process a calendar plan template that's setting up a series of dates. We can start document assembly. You saw that in the user-activated workflow that started the letter to the client. We can start an email. So yes, we can start an email that says, hey, thank you so much for coming to our firm and yada, yada, yada. We can start or send an e-note. That's what we did when we sent the e-note to say that somebody had added a time entry of more than 10 hours. We can display a message. Instead of sending an e-note to the controller, we could have just displayed a message that says, you just entered time that included hours worked or hours to bill of greater than 10 hours. Did you mean to do that? If not, go fix it. We can run a report from the report writer. We can launch a PracticeMaster program like the calendar or the daily calendar, a whole bunch of different programs. Or we can launch another program externally. We actually have workflows, for instance, when we send you these reminders that we're having a virtual user group meeting, or we send you an announcement about the webinar that you're attending right now, we use something called MailChimp. And so we have workflows that launch another program that goes out and can take somebody that we've just added to our system and subscribe them to the TABS free virtual user group announcement list, or subscribe them to the webinar announcement list. So yes, we can send an email upon adding a new client record, and then what we would do is we would create 2 new calendar records as separate events. Each of these events would appear down here. So we'd create a calendar record for a week off to send another email. And actually we could create a workflow that when that specific calendar record was marked complete, it would automatically create the email. And we could create another second calendar record to send the 3rd email a month from now. So yes, we can do that. No, we cannot create one workflow that sends the email and then schedules the other 2 emails so that they automatically get sent. But it can put it on somebody's task list, and when they come in that morning and say, well, I'm going to do that right now by clicking this to mark it complete, it would automatically create the email. Do we have more questions, Leanne?
No more question. Wait, one more question. Hold on. It just popped up. And if I could get the question, hold on. My questions aren't displaying. Give me a second here, Paul.
Well, I'm going to go on. You interrupt me again when you get it up there.
I did get it.
Okay.
Does it matter in what order the events are added?
That's a good point. These events actually occur simultaneously. These are not linear events. In other words, it's not, we're going to do this, and when we're done with that, we're going to do this, and we're going to do this, and then that, and then that. It's more a matter of, if I do what I just described, the email and the 2 calendars, they would all pop up at once, kind of layered, but nonetheless, they'd all pop at once. And there's really no ability to say fire in this specific order. There are just a bunch of things that happen when this, whatever the trigger is, occurs. Okay. So, to summarize, workflows are a way to automate certain functionality, and they're very open-ended. They're very programming-oriented. There's a lot of logic to defining when they occur, to defining how they occur, to defining what they do. When set up properly, they can actually cause things to move through your office in a predetermined way where one thing causes another thing to happen, and that thing being completed causes another thing to happen. They can generate letters, they can generate emails, they can make sure certain things don't get entered wrong. They can inform attorneys when matters for which their primary timekeeper are opened or closed. They can do a lot of things. So it's really just a matter of understanding what can be done at some level, and understanding what tools whoever would write a workflow has available to them, and then having a conversation with yourself, with your coworkers, with us. Works differently for different people, but working out what it is that you want to automate and how you're going to do that. At that point, someone's got to do it, and as I say, that can be you, that can be us, or that can be a combination of the 2, where you do a lot of the work, but you come to us and say, well, how do I make this happen, or how do I make sure it only happens for this particular client but not for others? So without any further ado, let's just take a look real quick at what our next webinar is. Now, normally when I announce the next webinar, the people that are attending this webinar are like, I think I need to attend that. We're kind of doing something different next month. We're giving a webinar on TABS 3. Now, we have a little bit over 1,200 clients, and 99.9725% of them have TABS 3. So our current clients don't really care about TABS 3, but we realize that we have a lot of people that are coming to us that aren't current clients, and we do have a handful that just have PracticeMaster, and they don't really understand what TABS is and how it works, so we'll be talking all about that next month. Another thing to remember is that if you go to our website, which is attorneycomputersystems.com, you can see all of our video content, including our 3 virtual user group meetings, one on TABS, one on PracticeMaster, one on WorldDocs. We have the Coffee Pot webinars, which you're attending now. We have a series of little snippets with tips on how to do certain things. We put 3 of those out a month. And we have something called the Paul and Mary Jo Show. Yes, it's really called the Paul and Mary Jo Show, where we delve more deeply into a specific topic. If you want to register or see what's already been recorded, you just go to whatever you're interested in, and at the top you'll see registration for the next event. This one will go away when we get the recorded version up for it and be replaced with what next month is, the Tabs 3 webinar. And then down below it you'll have, in descending order, the previously recorded webinars or virtual user group meetings or e-bites or Paul and Mary Jo shows. So I've been alerted by our humble and capable moderator, Leanne, that we have one more question.
Brian says this is so much information. He wants to know where he can access documentation of step-by-step instructions on creating workflows.
I like that. Who is this Brian guy? What's his last name?
Brian Moore.
Brian Moore. Oh, Brian. Hi, Brian. Excellent question. I'm going to share with you the secret treasure trove of stuff. Apparently, I'm supposed to meet with Bob. You never know what's going to pop up in my demo system. Tabs3.com, support, documentation. Click it. You have a whole bunch of manuals for different versions. You also have sample reports and training videos. So down at the bottom, we have the training videos, and these will link you down to that part of the page. But then we have the version 17 guides and manuals. Now, if you look at the top of the guides and manuals section for the appropriate version that you have, you'll see all these really neat new things that they've come up with called the guides. And I want to say that there's one on workflows. I guess I probably should have looked at this beforehand. Do you see it, Leanne? Am I scanning by it too quickly? I thought there was one on workflows. If there's not, it's going to be in the documentation. So the actual manual right here, we've got the PM, well, that's documented. There's somewhere in here is a PracticeMaster manual.
Well, there's
yeah, somewhere in here, somewhere in this section, there's a PracticeMaster manual, and I believe there is a guide on workflows. If there's not, then you would go back to the section on workflows within the manual. Now, when you go down to the bottom, you'll also see a link to their training video page, and they've got tabs in PracticeMaster, and I don't know if they have one on workflows, but if they do, it would be here, okay? And then you've also got our webinar. You know, you can review, as I said, you can come back here to the Attorney Computer Systems site when the recorded version is posted, and Patty will send you, if you're attending this right now, Patty will send you an email to tell you when the recorded version is available, and you can come back and listen to this again and take notes. Any more questions, Leanne?
no more questions.
Awesome. Well, everybody have a good rest of the afternoon and a good weekend. We'll see you next month, and bye for now.